Happy morning to one and all present here virtually. Today is the day we begin to learn to look through the eyes of others, to find out and experience what the world is like for them. Here is the big welcome to our Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Scott. We feel honored to have you here with us, sir. He is the retired Supervisory Special Agent of Federal Bureau of Investigation with 29 years of experience and 14 years of handling the investigation of thousands of cybercrime incidents. He is now educating the community on emerging computer intrusion threats and briefing about 750 cybercrime threat and preventing various organizations from becoming next victim. His publication include The Secret to Cybersecurity, a simple plan to protect your family and business from cybercrime. Sir, you have made all of us admire through your distinguished work in the area of cybersecurity. You are one of the most celebrated Foreign Service dignitaries. Now, I request as chief guest Mr. Scott to take up the session. Thank you.
Like I said, thank you and for so much for having me here today. It is such a privilege and an honor to be speaking to a group of students at the university today. My name is Scott Augenbaum. I am a retired special agent with the FBI, which is the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is the premier law enforcement agency in the United States. I spent the majority of my time, I'm going to tell you where I worked and what I've done, but now I reside in Nashville, Tennessee, which is right in the central part of the state. And it's a very special day for me because it was exactly 3 years ago to the day that I retired from the FBI at age 50. Today, I am 53 years old. And what are we going to be talking about today? We are going to be talking about the emerging cybercrime threat. But one thing I need to tell you, I have a passion project life. And what does that mean? I don't know if you ever heard of the term passion project. That means today I am doing what I love to do. And what do I love to do? I love to share my experiences when I was with the FBI. And what we're going to talk about today is what I go around and what I do for a living today, which is to teach individuals how to avoid becoming the next cybercrime victim. And you probably heard a lot of people talk about that, but what I do is a little bit different. I'm going to teach you how to avoid becoming the next cybercrime victim without spending money or without having an advanced degree in computer science or computer technology. I'm going to teach you how to reduce your risk of becoming the next cybercrime victim by a lot. Now, if we want to avoid becoming a cybercrime victim completely, there's only one thing we could do. We have to, if you have your smartphone, you take your smartphone and you smash it into your computer and you break your computer, because that's the only way we really can avoid all cybercrime. But what you're going to learn from me today is how a lot of the cybercrime really could be prevented. We hear about cybercrime every single day in the news. And the year 2020, there were a ton of large cybercrime cases. We dealt with ransomware. I'm going to talk a little bit about ransomware, which is really at a huge, it's happening every single day. We're dealing with identity theft. What happens when the bad guys steal our identity and they take our information and they buy cars and vacations and that stuff? We're seeing data breaches that are occurring every day where companies are just losing all of their information. I've been the victim of 8 separate data breaches during during my lifetime, and that's only 8 of them that I know. What happened this year? We had a death actually that happened in a hospital because of ransomware. We have the business email compromise that took place. Uh, we're just seeing so much stuff. And then in December of this year, we have a lot of large data breaches that are happening. We have the SolarWinds breach, which was a large data breach that impacted the United States by foreign threat actors. We're going to talk about who are these foreign threat actors. But when I go out, these are the things that I sit back and I talk to companies about, because so often this is kind of the first time that people hear about this topic. And what I try to do is bring this up, because the one thing about cybercrime that is so important to remember, it impacts all of us. It does not matter if you happen to be the CEO of an organization, or even just a college student, or a high school student, or maybe it's our parents. I mean, one of the reports says that there's going to be a cybercrime victim every 11 seconds. That means by the time my presentation is over, we're going to deal with hundreds of cybercrime victims. And I've dealt with a lot of stuff. And I had the opportunity during my career to be face to face with almost 1,000 victims. And what it's one of the things that I've seen, and one of the things that I've learned, I want you to go take a look at these facts and figures that are on this, because people ask me, wow, cybercrime is a new thing. This is something that's happening. And one of the things I'm here to tell you is, no, it's not. I could talk about the same stuff. These facts and figures that are going up that you see on stage or in front of you happen to be part of an article that was written by a gentleman by the name of James Lewis in 2013. And if you look at this, these are the same exact things that are impacting us today. Today, I actually sent an email to James Lewis and I said I was a big fan and I would love to interview him, because you're going to see a lot of people didn't take Mr. Lewis seriously. And I dealt with the same thing during my career. If you're looking for some really great facts and figures, go Google Cybersecurity Ventures and their almanac. They have some unbelievable information. And one of the facts that I really like to talk about all the time is how much the cybercrime problem has gone up. In 2015, the cybercrime problem was a $3 trillion problem. 3 trillion. That's a hard number to wrap your head around. Not billion, not million, but trillion. And that was the global cost of what the economic impact was to individuals, organizations around the globe. And by 2021, which is, we're here right now, the global cost is supposed to be about $6 trillion. That is a 100% increase in 5 years. And I don't think, and that's 100% in 5 years, and they are expecting it to go up another 100% in maybe 3.5 years. But one of the things this study does not take into account is that due to the release of COVID, since COVID happened here in the United States and all over the world, according to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, and I'm going to send you some really good websites for you to go to learn more and more about the FBI, because I can give you a 45-minute presentation on just what the FBI does. But according to the Internet Crime Complaint Center, cybercrime has went up, the reporting, 400% since COVID-19. Why is that? Think about it. We're all here, especially here in the United States, we are all remote workers for the most part. So what does that mean? Companies had to allow their employees to log in remotely from work, from home. And a lot of times I ask these companies, these individuals, are you using something known as two-factor authentication? And you're going to hear me talk about that quite a bit. And two-factor authentication is a second form of authentication. And that's probably one of the most common ways the bad guys are getting into organizations. And a lot of companies and individuals are not using two-factor authentication. They're also not logging in with virtual private networks. And the bad guys are stealing the passwords. They're logging in remotely to these new cloud platforms where the companies are storing their information. Also, because of COVID-19, we've seen a ton of targeted spear phishing emails, especially here in the United States, where all of a sudden we're getting emails saying, hey, there's been an outbreak in your neighborhood. Think about this. I'm a parent. I have a son who goes to high school. What would happen if I get an email from the high school saying that, hey, the school is going to be closed because there's a COVID outbreak? My first response is I'm going to want to click on that link. And especially here, we're seeing a lot of that. So the bad guys are really adapting. And I'm going to talk a little bit about their strategies. But one of the things that really, really bothers me about this is the fact that we keep spending more and more money on the information security spending. We are spending money on products. We are spending money on services. We're spending money on so many different types of things. Here in the United States, we're spending it on insurance. Every couple of weeks, there's a new startup going on. And again, according to Cybersecurity Ventures, we're going to spend almost $1 trillion cumulatively over the past 5 years. That means that we're spending more money and the problem keeps getting worse. Now, I want to see if the chat function here is working or anything like that. I want to ask you, what do you think, what does it mean to you if we keep spending money to fix a problem and the problem keeps getting worse? Does anyone want to tell me what do you think that means? Well, I'm going to tell you what it means to me. It means we're not doing it right. It means we're throwing money at the problem. Now, I'm not talking about that cybersecurity spending money. We need products and services. And one day I was out and I was speaking at a conference, and one of the vendors said to me, hey, Scott, we don't like your message. We don't think your message will work with us. And I was like, what's the problem? And I'm trying to think about what I said during my talk that really kind of rubbed them the wrong way. And it was really easy, because one of the things that we're really going to talk about is those things are depressing. Think about it. The cybercrime problem is getting worse. We're spending more money on the problem. But what did I discover in my career? In my 30 years with the FBI, almost half of it spent working cybercrime. I realized that a majority of the cybercrime victimizations could have been prevented if the victims were just empowered with a couple of key pieces of information. That's what drives me to do what I do. So when it comes down to things, and you ask me in one sentence, what do I do for a living? I teach individuals and organizations how not to become the next cybercrime victim. And I wrote this book called The Secret to Cybersecurity. And one of the things you're going to really learn is there really is not a secret. The secret is through education. The secret is to be empowered about the threat. And that's my goal. That is what I do today. And that's why I live a passion project type of life, because I go out and I am so passionate that I really wish that I could go back in time and I could give a copy of my book to my victims. Because I know that if they would have read my book, they would not become victims. That's what drives me to do my job. But if I would have told you some 33 years ago today that I would be retired from the FBI, wrote a book about cybersecurity, and be speaking to a group of students in India one day after my 53rd birthday. I would have said, no way at all. That's not my life. I want to tell you a little bit about my journey, because I did not wake up one day and decide that I was going to be an author. I was going to be a speaker. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I was raised by a single parent. My father passed away when I was a year old. I'm raised just by my mother and my grandmother. And the most important thing to them was to keep food on the table. So what kind of happened? I didn't do really well in school. I was an average student at best. But my mom was very, very excited that I just kept going up. And when I graduated high school and I went to what we call community college in the United States, and community college is where you go if you really can't get into a good college, she was just very, very happy that I was going to community college. When I graduated community college and I had maybe a C average, she was just happy that I had a college degree. But my mom used to look, because within the United States, we have jobs we call civil service workers, which are firemen and policemen and mailmen and sanitation workers. And she found that at the time that the FBI was hiring file clerks. And what is a file clerk? A clerical employee. And my mom said when I was 20 years old, she says, this is going to be a great opportunity for you. You're going to have health insurance and you are going to have a pension. And I was like, health insurance and a pension, what's that? I just want to get one of those really, really kind of cool FBI jackets and maybe I'll get a gun and a badge. And when I showed up for work, how many years ago was it? 1988, 33 years ago, September 6, 1988, I show up in New York City, and that's where I was living as a file clerk for the FBI. And I was just putting files away. Now, the FBI is the federal law enforcement agency within the United States. We have 50 states in the US, and we have state police, we have local police, we have county police. But the FBI is the premier law enforcement that's in charge of all, I wouldn't say in charge, but we handle federal crime. And federal crime is things that go across state lines. I'm going to talk about the priorities of the FBI. And so what I do, and when I'm at the FBI, I'm surrounded by a lot of positive role models, and these gentlemen and women too, because there are about 15% of the FBI special agents are female. They were such role models to me, and they explained to me that I couldn't go through life being between mediocre and below average. So I worked really hard. I went back to college at night. I had a 3.8 grade point average, which is almost a perfect grade point average. And I went back and I started working on my MBA at Fordham University in information technology and finance in 1992 when I was 24 years old. And the number one class I did not like was public speaking. It was really bad. I was really, really bad at it. So if anyone here says I'm not a good public speaker, that's not true. You could learn, you are not born being a public speaker, you learn to be a public speaker, and you do anything by repetition. The same thing is true with writing a book, which I'll talk about. I was never really a good writer, but I had a lot of good stories. So I spend my time in New York City. I'm doing accounting work and finance work for the FBI. I don't really want to be an FBI agent. I am a clerical employee. My title was financial analyst. I handled budgeting. I handled financial work. I was going back to school at night. I didn't carry a gun. I did not have a badge. I did not have arrest powers because that's not what I was doing. I was an accountant. But an opportunity opens up to become an FBI agent. And my boss, his name was Bob Grubert, he was really like a father to me. And he was very proud of me that I was going back to school at night. I went to school at night for 5 years while I worked. And he told me that there was an opening for FBI agents. And I said, Bob, it's not what I want to do. And he looked at me and he said to me very sternly, you are going to put in for it. And the next thing I knew, I put in for it. And I'm at the FBI Academy. In order to be an FBI agent, you need to be between the ages of 23 years old and 37 years old with a 4-year college degree and 3 years of work-related experience. So I had my 4-year degree. I had my time with the FBI as that was my job requirement. So I go down to the FBI Academy, which is in Quantico, Virginia. I don't know if you get the television show. I think it's on Netflix. It's called, it's FBI or Quantico. There's a very famous Indian actress who is one of the stars in that show. Honestly, I do not watch any television shows that have anything to do with the FBI because it's not like television. I'll tell you that much. I go down to the FBI Academy. It's a 16-week academy. I go through all the physical fitness training. I learn to fire a gun. I'm a little over my head. A lot of times, and I'm going to be honest with you, I wanted to quit. I really didn't want to do it. But I persevered and I got my orders and I got sent to Syracuse, New York, which was a small office in upstate New York. And if you had asked me to define the role of an FBI agent in 1995, when I was a young FBI agent, it was really, really easy to explain. There were bad people who did bad things, which were federal crimes, to good people. And I worked with state and local cops and I put bad guys in jail. What a fun and exciting job for, at the time, a 27-year-old young man. I had a gun, a badge, a bulletproof vest, a car with lights and sirens, and I had the coolest job in the world. And I just remember going out and doing things, and it became part of my personality. I loved it because I actually felt like I was making a difference, because these were criminals. They were doing bad things and we were putting them in jail. And it just made me feel so good, but it became part of my identity over the years. I didn't join the FBI again to work cybercrime cases. That's not what I wanted to do. But I got a call from a small internet service provider in 1996 who called me up to tell me that there were people selling stolen property on these things called bulletin boards. And I was like, okay. And that was the fun thing about being an FBI agent. Crime never happened in the office. If you got a call, you picked it up and you went out. And I had a little bit of a computer background, not much. But I went to graduate school, and back in the day, I had a laptop and I plugged the laptop into a modem, and there was a thing called America Online that was my first way into this thing called the internet. And I go over and I see all of this stuff. Gentleman who has this internet service provider shows me people selling stolen property and they're doing all these crazy things. And I remember that caused me to go out and buy my first home computer from a company called Gateway, which was one of the big manufacturers. And this is probably 1996. So what is that? 25 years ago? And 25 years ago, to get a home computer, it was almost $2,500 US. It was a 133 megahertz processor. I think it was an 8 megabyte hard drive. The screen was so large and so heavy, and there was really nobody to talk to because very few people had email in 1996. But that's how I kind of got involved in it. And by default, I became the cyber guy for the office. And we had two female agents in our office. But as part of this, so I become the cyber guy. So I go to my boss back in 1997 and I asked to take a class at one of the local colleges. It was called Introduction to the World Wide Web. But that's what we called it back in the 90s. And I remember it was denied. And they said to me, why would the FBI be interested in this thing called the World Wide Web? I just got to bring that up because that was like one of the hurdles that I got. So, you know what I did? I paid for the class out of my pocket because I wanted to learn about this thing called the internet. And since I learned about it, cyber started picking up a little bit, and I became the internet agent in the office for my division, which was not the cool, sexy job to have because we had agents working bank robberies and fugitives. We had two female agents on our squad, two of them, and neither one of them they were maybe about that tall. And one worked drug cases, which was really interesting. And another was chasing bad guys. And who was I chasing at the time? I was chasing like this. We were dealing with kids. We were dealing with thrill seekers. We were dealing with amateurs. And that is not the reason why I joined the FBI to really chase these kind of kids around. But 1998, 1999, cyber started taking a little bit more of a sinister turn. Why is that? We started dealing with e-commerce companies. We started moving money online. And what happened? The bad guys went to where the money is. So cyber kind of takes a sinister turn. I start working a lot more cybercrime cases. The only thing at the time I really knew about computers was shut it off and hope it works. I mean, I'm not a computer programmer by nature. I'm still working a ton of other cases and I'm learning a little bit about cyber. Now, after the events of 2001, September 11th, 2001, the FBI changes their scope and their priorities completely. The number one priority for the FBI was prosecuting the individuals who are responsible for terrorist activity and also preventing terrorist activity. The number two priority for the FBI is preventing espionage, which is the theft of intellectual property, academic secrets, government secrets by foreign governments. And the third priority for the FBI is cybercrime. And I hear about that and I'm like, wow, I'm on the cutting edge of this. You know, I'm sitting here and I'm one of the cyber agents and I'm looking for a little bit of a change. So I apply, you know, the FBI forms a cyber division in 2002 to develop a national cyber strategy that's supposed to go around the country. And I apply and to get a job in this cyber division at Washington, D.C. And as I'm going to put in for this, I just will never forget, you know, I was kind of chastised by my friends at work. And they were like, I don't know, did anyone here ever feel this way? Did you ever put your heart and soul into something and tell people this is what you wanted to do? And then they make fun of you for doing it. And this is what happened. You know, this is 2003. I go to Washington, D.C., and everyone's making fun of me. And they're telling me that I'm committing career suicide because this cybercrime problem is going to go away by 2007. Let me ask you guys, ladies, did the cybercrime problem go away 13 years ago? No, it's gotten so much worse. So I'm in Washington, D.C. from 2003 to 2006. I'm working on the FBI's national cyber strategy because within the FBI, we have 56 field offices throughout the United States, and we have offices overseas. And in each of these 56 field offices, we have they started hiring new agents who can handle the cybercrime problem. and and that's my job. But in 2006, I am promoted to become a supervisor of a dedicated cyber task force in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm kind of really excited about this because this is a brand new challenge for me. But remember, my whole entire identity is built on the fact that I put bad guys in jail as a regular FBI agent, and now I'm going to manage this FBI cybercrime squad. But one of the things that I really realized kind of quickly is that work, and I'm going to go through this, that it really wasn't as easy as you thought it was. Because between 2006 and 2018, I probably had a chance. I interviewed almost over 1,000 cybercrime victims. And during this time, I kind of really going to share the truths that I've learned about cybersecurity, because there were a couple of things that really happened that transformed my life incredibly. Because remember, here I am, I'm in my 20s to 30s. I go in, I'm playing the role of hero. But one of the things that I quickly realized when I become an FBI agent working cyber cases, I'm really not able to play that role of hero anymore. And that really impacted me quite dramatically. So during this time, I have an opportunity to deal with almost 1,000 victimizations. And out of those, I came up and I figured out a couple of things. And I call this the truths to cybersecurity. And the first truth to cybersecurity is that none of my victims ever expected to be a victim. They never thought that they had anything that was worth stealing. They never really believed that the bad guys would want to target them. They all had different excuses of why they wouldn't want to be a cybercrime victim. And you see this slide over here, why companies do not take cybersecurity seriously. I came up with a list of 30 of these slides because as I'm going out, none of my victims ever expected it. But at the same time, I did probably almost 1,000 talks because that was kind of my job with the FBI. So I go from 2006 to 2013 as the supervisor, and I realized that, and I'm going to kind of go through a little bit more of these things. Things don't really go as according to plan. Yeah, and I would say it was probably about 2000, 2013, 2014 is when I really hit a wall. And this was the same year there was a ton of really large breaches that were going on. This is the same year that the article came out by Jim Lewis. I'm just going to move this so I can look at this. We start seeing a lot of really large breaches occur. And we have in the United States, the Target breach is the first, I think this is a game changer because we have a really large retailer where the bad guys were able to get in, put credit card scrapers on and scrape out all of this information belonging to one of the largest retailers in the United States. Then in the spring, we have Community Health Systems, which is a healthcare company in Nashville, Tennessee. It's targeted by the Chinese government. And I've been looking at the Chinese, I've been investigating the Chinese getting into healthcare companies since 2008. And this is the first time we start seeing really targeted healthcare attacks. And that's when China comes out with their 5-year strategic plan in 2013, which is to become the world's leading innovator in healthcare technology. So they start getting requirements, and one of those requirements is to learn as much. So we start seeing that. That's when Anthem gets breached, and we have 80 million pieces of information. And then we have JP Morgan, a very large bank in the United States. Mandiant, APT1, I tell you, if you were interested in cybersecurity, that is a great report. And I guarantee you that none of these companies ever believed that they would become a victim. So as we go in here, and I'm starting to deal with all of these different types of cybercrime incidents, well, the second truth to cybersecurity is once the cyber criminals steal your stuff, the chances of law enforcement getting your data back, your money back, your proprietary information back is slim to none. And I've seen this firsthand in so many different cases where the bad guys, and this is very, very upsetting for organizations, because think about it. Think about within a university, and I mean, you can take a case study, you can look at any organization and they all have stuff that could be stolen. And this is what I do a lot with organizations. I sit back with them. I try for them to identify what are their key critical assets. Because once the bad guys steal it, and this is a truth, and this is what I sit down with organizations and we do the deep dive. And this is probably the number one thing that organizations do not realize. So that's what I have to talk to organizations. That's why we need to start taking this seriously. So when we go into this, let's really kind of focus a little bit over here on what's the difference between traditional criminal enterprise, criminal investigations, and cyber investigations. I remember it was like yesterday. It was 1995. I get a call from an individual in Washington, D.C., who tells me that he tried to borrow money from a finance company in upstate New York. And he sent this finance company $12,000 to get him a loan. This is called an advanced fee. And he was going to get a loan for $1 million, but he had to provide a $12,000 down payment. This individual in Washington, D.C. sent the money up in a check, and he sends it to a company. The company stops returning his phone calls. This gentleman calls me. I'm on the job maybe 3 or 4 weeks. He gives me the address, and what do? I drive by the address, and I see it's a trailer. It's not a business. So within the United States, I have to go to a prosecutor, and I have to get the prosecutor to open up a case. And what does the prosecutor do? Yes, they allow me to open up a case. And in the United States, according to US law, we have something known as a grand jury. I can't go to a bank and ask the bank for information about the subject's bank account. So I have to go to a grand jury, which is usually between 24 and 26 people, and I have to present the facts of the case. And I have to say, this gentleman in Washington, D.C. sent $12,000 to this company here. The company didn't do anything with the money. And the grand jury says, yes, there is enough probable cause to provide you with a subpoena. The subpoena allows me to go to the bank. And because the bank cannot give me records, I have to get this document that, so I get the bank records, I look through the bank records, I identify other victims. I see this guy in Syracuse has ripped off a lot of people. Now, this was kind of a new case for me, so I went over, and there were other experienced agents in the office who helped me. We did a search warrant, which had to be signed by a judge. It gave me permission to go into this guy's house and do a search and seizure for bank records. I found the bank records. We put it all together because the evidence never, ever disappeared. And what I was able to do from reviewing the bank records, I found out that this man stole $150,000 from probably about 18 other victims. And because of the work that I did, I was able to put this guy in jail for 2 years. boy, it felt great. It was really, really easy. But one of the things that I discovered was working cyber cases really wasn't like that, because here we have cyber cases. What are we dealing with? We're dealing with, once we identify the subjects, because I'll give you a great example. So we have a university here in the United States. Let's say a college in Nashville. Nashville University gets hacked into. Okay, what do I find? It's an IP address. We resolve the IP address, and we see that the IP address came from a university in California. I have to go through the whole entire process, get the grand jury to get me a subpoena. Then we have to have an FBI agent in California go out to the company and get the information. Sometimes they can't give us the information. We have to have a forensic examiner look at it. It might take a couple of months. And what do we find out? We find out that that computer was hacked into from another computer that might be in New York City. Then we have to do the other thing and go all the way there to New York City to figure it out. And then we are able to figure out that, wait a second, that may have come from a computer in Bangladesh. And I had a case in Bangladesh, and the FBI, we do have an office in Mumbai, and we have an agent that covers Bangladesh, but they didn't have any cyber investigators in Bangladesh to be able to help us. And there was also, the US didn't have an extradition treaty with Bangladesh. And then we tried to work a little harder with the government there, but that's when the ISIS bombing occurred and we really couldn't do things. So proving attribution is very, very hard in cyber, and we can talk about that in so much detail. We do have a shortage of cyber agents and prosecutors because technology is really one of the things we quickly discover. You can make a lot more money in the private sector working for one of the big four accounting firms than you can with the government. And also, digital evidence needs to be preserved quickly. Another thing too, on a lot of the ransomware cases, the money's going to Bitcoin accounts. So it becomes very, very hard to trace the money. So that is why the difference between why cyber investigations are so hard to follow through. And also, another thing that you're going to hear a lot about is crimeware. Back in 1999, it was to be a cyber criminal, you needed a lot of skill. Today, we call it crimeware as a service, where you can get tools off of the dark web. And the dark web's a whole nother topic that we can dive into. Each one of these slides that I'm giving you today, there are stories among stories among stories on going through the education process like this. That's why I can't give you an MBA in information security in 45 minutes to an hour. You give me a couple of hours, I can reduce the risk, because I'm going to take you to the journey that I went through. And then we're going to kind of stop and we're going to answer questions. And if you guys enjoyed the talk, I'm going to come back. I'm going to give you some high-level strategies that we're going to talk about very briefly. But when we come back to the tactics, we can do that again. But as I'm saying, everything that you need to commit your crime is available online. So with a little bit of skill, you can go out there, and that is what the cyber criminals are doing to this day. The third truth to cybersecurity is that the chances of law enforcement bringing the cyber criminals to justice, I hate to say it, is slim to none. We within the FBI, we were arresting people. We were putting cases together, but the bad guys are located in foreign countries that are outside of our reach. We don't have FBI offices in all countries, and a lot of times we don't have good relationships. And even countries that we do have good relationships, it takes forever. I worked up in Toronto, Canada for a month. It was so hard to move things through the courts. And so where are the cyber criminals located? Again, we can go into this in such detail, but cybercrime is no longer a localized problem. These are some of the most wanted cyber criminals today. And the challenge for us within the FBI happens to be that they're located overseas. We're dealing with the Chinese, we're dealing with the Russians. We are dealing with the North Koreans, the business email compromise by the West Africans, one of the largest scams that is going on to this day, impacting corporations around the world. So let's stop and think about this for a second. Let's stop and think about what we talked about. This cybercrime problem is going up, okay? The amount of money we are spending is going up. And that's not a good thing. The bad guys steal your information. The chances of law enforcement getting your information back is really, really slim to none. And the chances of law enforcement putting the bad guys in jail is also. So I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to go into the chat over here for a second. Taking those things that I just told you, I want to get a couple of answers from you. How does that make you feel? Okay? Bad guys steal your stuff, you're not getting it back. Nobody's going to jail, and the cybercrime problem's getting worse. I'm waiting. I'm hoping somebody's going to answer me over here. See, this is when, okay, one person. You see, I love uncomfortable silence. So let me get this right. There's only one person here who heard me. Let's try again, because I'm not going to move off this slide and we're going to sit here all day today. How does it make you feel? Arjun, thank you for saving me, because if it wasn't for Arjun here today, I would think that nobody was paying attention. So we got a little bit scared. We have betrayal. You know how it makes me feel? It makes me feel depressed. We don't know what to do, panicked. Yeah, I mean, these are just not really great messages. These are not good things. You know what it makes me feel? It makes me feel a little depressed. Because here this was for me. Just think about this. Here I am. I'm an FBI agent. I'm trying to do my job. I joined the FBI to help people. I can't get their money back. I can't put the bad guys in jail. And then it dawns on me. And I didn't figure this out until probably my 25th year in the FBI. This is what I figured out. That most of the cybercrime victimizations could have been prevented if my end users were just empowered with a couple of key pieces of information. I discovered the commonalities that I had in almost all of my stuff. I'm going to go for about 5 more minutes, and then we're going to take a couple of questions here, because this is really the part that I really want to take you onto my journey. I found this out, and I was like, I'll never forget the day I found this out. And I said, that was it. That was my calling. I knew what I needed to do. I needed to come out and share this message with anyone who would listen. So within the FBI, I took a job as the outreach coordinator, and part of my job was going out. I was educating the community. I was doing almost about 250 talks a year. Sometimes I was doing about 4 talks in one day. And what was I doing? I was sharing this message. I put together a list called the Cyber Tips List, and I gave it away to people. And I said, look, you need to take this. These are the 8 to 10 points that you really, really need to follow to be able to do this. And I really, for the first time in years, I felt like I was making a difference. But I had some roadblocks. I had a boss who really said that I was wasting too much time on the education part, and I should spend more time on the investigations. Now, remember, the investigations really, we couldn't get the victim's money back, and we couldn't put the bad guys in jail. That made it very, very challenging. And then I heard that I couldn't give out my cyber tips list, and that was against our policies. So on my 50th birthday, I retired from the FBI. I was a little frustrated. And people ask me all the time, Scott, do you miss the FBI? And I immediately say no. Why do I not miss the FBI? Had a great career. I loved it. I would do it again. It has nothing to do with any of the political stuff going on in the world right now. It's because today I do what I love to do. For the past 3 years, I go around and I share with organizations the steps, the framework that I've developed to teach people how not to be the next victim. And if you give me just a couple of minutes, can I have a couple of minutes and explain to you what I've developed and how I've developed it? I'm going to kind of rush through a couple of these slides over here because I really just want to show you what are these points that we really need to know. It's understanding the scope of the problem. If I can't explain to a company why you need to take this seriously, nobody's going to pay attention. So we need to identify our digital assets. Companies do not know what they need to protect. This is a step that I go through with companies because so much of our information is being stored up in cloud-based applications that are outside of the world of IT. We need to understand about the dark web and password reuse. People are using the same password all the time. We have to create strong, unique, how to create and strong. I see there's an extra and in my step 4 over here, how to create strong and unique passwords. It's in the wrong place. I think you guys get the point on that. We need to realize that email is the main attack vector. 90% of bad things come in the form of email. Plain and simple. And you're not going to get an email from Boris Badnoff at cybercriminal.org. You are going to get an email from somebody you know and somebody you trust in phishing. We also have to talk about preventing the business email compromise, realizing that this is an IT problem and this is a business process problem, and also going into ransomware and protecting your family from cybercrime. Each one of these topics that I talk about right now is a minimum of 15 to 20 minutes on each topic to give you the tactical points on what you need to keep yourself safe. And this is what I do today. This is what I talk to companies about. I really wanted to give you a little bit of background on my journey, how I got to this place. And like I said, if you guys are interested, what I'd like you to do, whoever is hooked up with me on LinkedIn, leave me a message on LinkedIn. Tell me that you enjoyed the talk, and I will come back and I will go in and spend more time with you on a deeper dive, because I have one goal. That is to prevent you, your family, your loved ones from becoming the next cyber crime victim. And I want you to be able to do it without spending money and without really having a technical background. Maybe I oversimplified the problem, because I'm not saying we're not going to spend money, but this is what I tell companies. If you do not do what I tell you to do for free, you will still have a problem. And with that, what I'd like to do is, I know we have a bunch of questions that were submitted, and I'd love to answer those questions and take this topic into another direction, or any direction we'd like to deal with. And now I can take a deep breath, because I think I talked for 55 minutes and did not stop or take a breath. I did take one drink.
Thanks, Scott, for the wonderful speech. So shall we proceed to the questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the first question is given by Sweta Lakshmi. So the question is, how effective is our cybersecurity strategy in addressing the business risks?
That's been a challenge for decades because I think we become way too reactive in the way we think. Think about the four truths to cybersecurity on what I've just discussed here today. When I bring these up and I talk to large businesses, this is the first time they are hearing about this. That's a problem because if we go back to the slide that I have, that I talk about my top 30 excuses why companies don't take it seriously, those topics need to be ingrained into the C-suite of every organization. And from my point of view, these discussions are not happening. Companies are throwing a lot of money at the problem, but these companies are not having. So the strategy, and when I went for my MBA in 1992, one of the big discussions we were having in the world was information technology and the business units do not communicate very well. And now you have information security, which is thrown in. And remember, information security is complete opposite of information technology. Information technology makes things more effective and more efficient. Information security is expensive and slows things down. So we need to have more conversations into that discussion.
Thanks, Scott. The next question is submitted by Haripriya R. As normal citizens using smartphones, what kind of threats are we exposed to without even our knowledge? And what kind of attacks are possible?
Well, the first thing we have to realize is so many of us are using smartphones. Very few of us are using computers. What are the bad guys doing? They are targeting the smartphone users. So remember, on your email, we need, and I didn't talk about this, we're going to do this next time. We need to think before we click. 90% of the threats are coming via email. They're also coming through text messages. When we are downloading apps, we should only download them through reputable sites. That becomes a problem. Try not, you want to get these from the Google store or what's the iPhones? And I have an iPhone. I can't even remember the name of it. The App Store. Get apps through reputable places. And also remember, make sure on our smartphones, we are using a strong and robust password, because if we drop those, we will suffer. The bad guys will pick that stuff up. And there's lots of tips that are out there that you could Google for that. But we're starting to see more threats like ransomware targeting phones. The bad guys are going to target where the users are. That's why we're starting to see a lot of crimes against children. They're going on Xboxes because that's where the audience is gravitating.
Okay. So the next question is given by Celsia Ebenezer. So the question is like this. So nowadays, many startups, companies, they are facing ransomware attacks. But since they are very small companies, they don't have a separate security team. So how they will handle the situation?
There are some really great ransomware prevention guides that are out there. Traditionally, we think about the most important thing we need to do is we need to back up our data. But backing up our data is different than protecting our data. There are certain steps. There's a great ransomware prevention guide that's out there. I covered like this 8 steps that we need to be able to take within our organization. But also we need to remember that a majority of the ransomware is occurring from really a couple of really main things. We need to make sure we're patching our systems, we're patching our operating systems, we're patching our third-party apps. We also need to realize that email is the main attack vector. So keeping ourselves aware, and let's just remember, no company is too small to become a cybercrime victim. So that's one of the things that I really talk about is the cyber attacks on small businesses, because when it happens to a small business, it's really, really devastating. That's why making sure that we are backing up, like I'm starting to get into my habit where at least every couple of days, you can't even see, I'm using a external hard drive to back up my information just in case if I get that. And now here's the thing, I'm not leaving this plugged in because if I might get an email from somebody. I might click on the link. My antivirus might be out of date. I might get ransomware. I have to live with that every single day.
Thanks, Scott. The next question is given by Kirtana. So what are the activities that will be considered as a cybercrime?
What activities are considered cybercrime? I covered those. We're talking about ransomware, the business email compromise, targeted spear phishing, identity theft, a lot of it going through. One of the topics that to look into that we didn't talk about in a lot of detail is preventing the business email compromise. Google the term business email compromise. That is better than malware. It's all social engineering. Educate yourself on the different threats that occur, and we need to take steps. The problem is they're not all in one place. That's why I kind of wrote a book. But I look at my bookcase, I got a lot of great books that I've never read. So that's why now I'm working on building courses where I could go over and spend a half an hour on each one of these topics and try to make it interesting and try to make it entertaining and try to teach people how not to become the next victim.
Thanks, Scott. The next question is given by Pavitrani. Since cybercrime is invisible and I'm not aware whether I'm a victim or not, so how do I find whether I'm victimized or not?
Well, usually your money will disappear out of your bank account, and or your friends will get emails from you that your account has been taken over. So one of the things that we need to do, did I even put it in here? Oops. As I'm looking through this is my new PowerPoint presentation. I see that I left something out. Two-factor authentication. We need, that's a term right now that we need to go out, and you need to put that on your email and on all of your stuff. I'm going to see if I can type that into the thing here because I don't see it on my two-factor two-factor authentication. This is a must for your Gmail account. This is going to prevent you from becoming on your Gmail, on your social media accounts, on your banking, on your finance. If you put this is something that none of my victims had in place. So make sure that you do that. That will eliminate quite a bit of risk from you. But also remember, we need to think before we click and think before we act. Because if you do everything I tell you to do, that's great. But what about the rest of the people? What about your friends? What about your family? You know, what happens when you get your email from your cousin? Is it really your cousin? And he or she sends you an email at 3 o'clock in the morning. So be aware, be alert.
Okay, thank you, Scott. The next question is given by Nitin Santosh. So what's your view on cyberbullying and how someone else can get rid of such kind of bullying?
Okay, you came in a little broken up. Was that the question on cyberbullying?
Yeah, exactly. Let me repeat the question if you want.
Yes, please.
What is your view on cyberbullying and how someone else can get rid of such kind of bullying?
Oh, well, I hate to say it, it's here to stay. It's here to stay. I don't know how you prevent this. When I was a kid, I was bullied. We all were bullied when we were kids here in the United States. But what happened? We dealt with it and we went home and then we dealt with it at school. But now everybody's on Instagram, everybody's on all these different social media platforms. And I have a situation where I have a friend whose son committed suicide because of cyberbullying. And I think it's all about the education and educating the parents. But think about it, most parents do not know what their kids are doing because a lot of people aren't using computers. What are kids doing? They're using smartphones. And the kids are using the smartphones at the youngest age. These are things that, and I'll ask you guys, or people on the call, who's responsible for teaching children about cyberbullying? Do you think it's the family or do you think it's school? That's a really big question, and I would teach that to my kids because I have two boys, they're age 15 and they're age 13, 15 and 18. And it's having those discussions and really trying to make them better people. Very, very important. And as a parent, you need to know the signs if your child is being bullied, and you'll be able to see that. And it's having those discussions.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. So the next question is also given by Mithun Santosh. So what is your tips for protecting ourselves against identity theft?
Well, in the United States, we have something which is called freezing our credit. And I don't know if you have that in India. And here, this is something now that I'm able to do. I'll type that in again so you can do your research on it. Well, in becoming the victim of identity theft, I would say organizations that have our information aren't doing a good job. My stuff has been stolen 8 times that I know of. That's kind of problematic. But, making sure that you have good, strong, secure passwords, their unique passwords, and setting up the two-factor authentication would probably be the best thing that you could do. And also be careful using public Wi-Fi, because the bad guys, the cyber criminals, can set up, we call them pineapple routers, and those routers create evil hotspots, which means you will think it's a real hotspot. You'll log in, and then you'll log into your account, and they will steal your username and password. So my thing over there, the two-factor authentication will keep the bad guys out of your accounts.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. The next question is given by Prashant Kumar. So how do we overcome from a cyber attack? How do we overcome? How do we overcome from a cyber attack?
How do we overcome? Avoid becoming a victim. Follow the things that we talked about today and that we hopefully can talk about again, which is identify your mission critical accounts. Number 1, make sure you don't have the same password for your mission critical accounts. Have strong, robust passwords that should be a minimum of 12 characters to 15 characters with special symbols and numbers. Setting up the two-factor authentication. That's what made it so painful for me. I dealt with victims. You know what it felt like? That I had to sit down, and I had a story of a man who lost $700,000 of his whole entire life savings. And he came to me asking, how can I recover? It was horrible. He could not recover. That is why it's so important for you to do these things that we're talking about today.
Okay. So the next question is given by Yuvashri. So how do we protect sensitive information handled and stored by third parties?
Well, unfortunately, we're kind of at the mercy of the third parties. That is the problem today. And a lot of, we're giving out our information to small companies. There's a lot of this information is on the dark web. And that is why I'm teaching small companies that they need to take these steps. But it's not their core competency. That's not what they do. And that becomes so problematic. These are the same issues that I've been dealing with. The same questions that I'm getting today are the same questions I've been trying to answer for the past 12 years. That's why we need to start taking this threat more seriously. And I'm trying to do it one presentation at a time.
Got the next question is given by Pavitrayani. So over 750 cybercrime threats, so which is the most dangerous in your point of view?
Well, I would say the two things that to me are the biggest pressing things right now is ransomware and the business email compromise. And what are we going to do when we start getting ransomware? Now, most of the ransomware now is impacting the companies financially, because think about it. How long can an organization survive without access to their information? Not very long. And within the FBI, I always used to tell people, do not pay the ransom. But what do we see now? The bad guys are targeting the backups. And an organization can't survive. So what scares me that these terrorist groups will be able to get in and lock up our infrastructure or medical devices. So ransomware, 2015 started in the same time the business email compromise. Again, most prolific problems that we are seeing. And what do they have in common? Email is the attack vector. So just remember, when we talk about prolific problems, we're talking about email being able to distribute the attacks.
Thanks, Scott. The next question is given by Noel Matthew. So does Google actually sell our private information to companies for monetary gains? And they, in turn, return back to us in the form of ads on various other social platforms?
Well, there's no easy answer to that. I think Google is looking at our habits. There's so many different things that, and there's so much, it's a whole nother issue in the whole privacy section. And if you Google, I wrote a couple of blogs about that. Again, we want our information. We want access to Google. That's why you can avoid all this. You shut your location down on your phone, and then you don't have your GPS and none of your apps work. A lot of times when I'm out, and I have my Google up and I'm driving in my car, I'll see an ad that's coming from a store 3 blocks down. And I'm looking around, I'm like, dude, they know where I am all the time. I think we're in a little too deep on this. I think about this on the social media. It's just we're going down this path where we are becoming very, very dependent. Now, do I worry about that? No, not in the least. Is Google looking at everything that I'm doing? Maybe. Do I care? That's just me. I have bigger problems to deal with than is if Google looking at my information. But that'd be a great research paper for someone to do on, the issues between privacy. But when I start looking at people's Facebook profiles, they are providing so much information about themselves. They're telling people that they're on vacation. They're not doing a good job of protecting their own privacy. They're taking pictures of their kids. It's just, it's really a big mess.
Okay, Scott. So the next question is given by Raghuram Krishna. So there is a widespread news about WhatsApp sharing user privacy with Facebook and Instagram. So what's your view on it actually? So what if it is implemented?
Again, another tough question. Listen, I have my own opinions on that. I tell people, if you don't like it, get off of it. However, there's no such thing as really getting off of it. People put up all this information and then they want to get off. And these are things that I see our children really don't take, they don't even understand it. They don't even understand all the apps that they have on their phones. And I mean, we've seen movies about this 20 years ago, but maybe I'm a little Pollyanna about it. I really don't worry about that stuff. I am too busy trying to protect people from cybercrime issues that I really, when I see articles about that, I don't read them. I just don't have the time to process that. So I'm really sorry about those, just not being able to really address those.
Okay, thanks, Scott. The last and final question. So from Manigandan. So basically, what we can do to protect our data?
What can we do to protect our data? We need to educate the leadership within our organization. We need to be able to advise the corporate leaders about the scope of the problem, how the problem is getting worse, how throwing money at the problem is not going to handle the problem, and how we have to change the culture within the organization and the hygiene within the organization. If I can teach, and I come in and I do these talks for companies, if I can teach people how to be safe at home, they will be safe at the office. It's just that simple. You can't do it the other way around. I do not believe that it works. And that's some of my goals. And that's what I'm trying to do, is build these courses out virtually and trying to compartmentalize, because there's so much information. Today, I feel like I barely scratched the surface on what we can talk about. And just think about the average person's attention span. How do I get in front of an audience that says to me, Scott, give us your best 45 minutes to keep people safe? If I don't share my stories with you and I just say, hi, I'm Scott, I'm a former FBI agent, these are the 8 things you need to do, everybody knows what you need to do. I did not share with you anything that you probably didn't already know. I just framed the situation differently. And that's why it's so important. And that's my mission. That's what I continue to do. And my goal is to get this information into the hands of the small businesses, the nonprofit organizations, the parents, because those were my worst victims. During my career with the FBI, I dealt with 1,000 victims. It broke my heart. I couldn't help them. It made me feel really, really bad. But today I do what I love to do, which is sharing this information. And I really hope that you take what I've taught you tonight and be able to change your habits. And if you only remember one thing today, or let's break it down. Email is the main attack vector. Think before you click, think before you act, and set up the 2-factor authentication. If you do that today, you'll be okay. If you like this presentation today, hit me up on LinkedIn, tell me you did, and we can go into a deeper dive next time. And it was an honor for me to spend my evening with you and sharing my story. I hope everyone here enjoyed it, but also another big takeaway, find out what you love to do and do it. I don't feel like I work. I do not feel like I have a job, because I love doing what I do. And if you put your passion in front of your profit, you will make money and you will be fulfilled. And that's my bit of advice for you, everyone here today.
Sure. Thank you so much, Scott. And one more thing that we need to know from your side. So, what are the career options the students may have if they're really interested in cybersecurity? So what's the potential it has, this particular domain, for their career perspective?
For their careers?
Yeah. So.
Oh, if you go to that cyber security almanac, you will see that if you want a job, learn cybersecurity, there are going to be millions of unfilled positions within, this is just within the United States. This is the big career gap right now. And it's all about learning networking and learning that. And take this, go on and every day, if you want to be an expert, go to Google, go to news, read about the cybercrime incidents every single day. And look at them and say, hey, could these be prevented? The SolarWinds breach happened. I thought that was really, really complicated. What did I discover? The password to the SolarWinds database was password 12345. Not a complicated thing. So learn as much as you can. Life, one of the things that I learned from one of my mentors is lifelong learners or lifelong earners. I continued my education well into my 40s and finished my MBA and took a lot of certifications. So learn as much as you can, but find something you love to do.
Sure. Thank you, Scott, for the information and insight. And from the student side, shall we ask any of them having any questions to Scott? So if you have any questions to Scott, you can raise your hand. Still, we have a few minutes of his precious time.
Or shoot me an email or send me something on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat with you. I'd love to answer questions. So hit me up on LinkedIn, anybody. That's where I spend a lot of time and look at some of the posts that I put up, because I'm always trying to provide a little bit of content about what I'm doing.
Yeah, I've shared the LinkedIn profile to the students too. So sure, they will find you in LinkedIn and they will post some questions to you. Please, I hope you will also there. You'll be there to help them in the future too, if they request or anything.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Scott, for this wonderful evening that you have spent with us. I really appreciate your effort here, and I really admire what you're doing to the society, Scott. That's really wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And like I said, it was a pleasure and an honor to be here, just in this global world that I can sit here right now and within 5 minutes take my jacket off and be asleep. So.
Yeah, really, thanks for the time. That's really appreciated.
Okay.
Really, thank you.
If anyone has any questions, just hit me up on LinkedIn, and have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Thiru. Thank you, Mr. Thiru, this virtual assistant, for setting this wonderful event. Thank you so much, Thiru.
If it wasn't for him, I would be on tomorrow night, not tonight.
Okay. Sweta, over to you.
Thank you is a word that expresses extreme gratitude, humility, and understanding. I thank our beloved chief guest, Mr. Scott, for sharing his knowledge with us. Thank you, sir, for spending your valuable time with us. I hope everyone would have got some knowledge about cybersecurity and its threats. I thank our head of the department, Dr. Venkateshwar and Loganathan, for organizing this webinar. I thank my gratitude to Mr. Joel Anandraj for his support. I also thank all the faculty members and my dear student friends for their valuable presence. Thank you.
Thank you all. See you in the next event.